Gonna cause a stink, won't be the first to blink. I'm not who you think, don't mess with me. I'm Amy, your friendly neighborhood history nerd. And I have a bit of a confession. I am a feminist. Gasp. Yes, how shocking. One of my favorite things about history, besides the complete insanity that comes with stupid people being stupid, is looking at women of history and seeing how they not only survive, but thrive in a male world to varying levels of success. One story in particular stands among my favorites. A story of a queen suppressed by a patriarchal colonizing society, a woman who did not back down in the face of danger, a mother who stood to free her people and avenge her daughter's honor, one who has resonated through the centuries and who somehow made their mark on her story. Today is a tale of resilience, of courage, of defiance, of standing for what you believe in, of not letting those who would push you down get away with it. A mother, a queen, a warrior, a legend. Today, I shall introduce you to the myth, the legend, Boudicca. To be honest, the first place I think I ever heard of this legend is Horrible Histories. If you don't know what that is, it's the best way to introduce your children to his history. Anyway, not much is known about Boudicca, mostly because the only sources we have of her come from her enemies, the Roman Empire. Tacitus wrote a few decades later, and his father-in-law actually fought against Boudicca's forces. Cassius Dio was writing from the other side of the empire, approximately 170 years after Boudicca's rebellion. So that's fun. First, I'm going to put Boudicca into context, then describe her rebellion before concluding with her cultural impact. Remember, I am not a professional. I just want an excuse to fangirl about one of my favorite historical figures. There are plenty of better sources to learn more about Boudicca, and if you find this story interesting, I encourage you to do more research. Thanks to Callan for filming this, and before we proceed, I just feel it is necessary to give a small content warning. This story will briefly discuss the sexual assault of teenagers, so please proceed with caution. Now, onto the show. So, the year is 60 AD. The Roman Empire has been taking over everything, just expanding and conquering whatever they wanted. In 43 AD, so less than 2 decades before our story takes place, the Emperor Claudius does something that not even Caesar could do. He conquers the isle which the Romans called Britannia, modern-day Britain. Well, sort of. They haven't gotten to the far north and will never quite take Scotland because Scotland is awesome. But a huge chunk of Britain, mostly the southeast part, has been taken by the time of Boudicca. During this time, Rome is still expanding west into Wales. Hey, for once it's the British who are getting taken over and colonized. Anyway, Boudicca herself was a Celt. Before Rome, Britain was home to many Celtic tribes. The most important to our story is the Iceni, who lived roughly in modern-day Norfolk. I have a visual guide here, so Norfolk is this one. This is Norfolk. This is where Boudicca lived. Now, we don't know if she was born into them or if she later joined them through marriage, but we do know Boudicca became the queen of the Iceni. Her husband, Presitarchus, was the king of this tribe. He was a client king to Rome. Together, they had 2 daughters. Things seemed pretty peaceful. Prestitarchus had seemingly come to some sort of agreement with the Romans. Everything was perfectly fine. And then Prestitarchus died, and everything went downhill. In his will, Prestitarchus had left half of his lands to his daughters and half to the Roman Emperor Nero. He probably thought this was the perfect way to keep Rome satisfied while maintaining his royal line. Prestitarchus, however, forgot one crucial thing. Rome loved taking stuff. They saw something that wasn't theirs, and they decided to take it through any means necessary. Now, there could have been 2 reasons why Rome decided to do this. The first is that Roman society was very, very patriarchal. So the idea of daughters inheriting would have been ridiculous to them. Another reason takes a bit more explaining. You see, Rome had given all of their British client kings a huge amount of money. We are talking millions! And once Prestitarchus died, they decided they wanted the money back, with interest. They pillaged the Iceni lands and attacked their ruling family. Boudicca herself was publicly flogged. Her teenage daughters were raped. Little did Rome know, this event would be the spark which would ignite a flame which would ravage Roman Britain. Imagine this. You are a mother, a leader among your people. You have been under the rule of this conquering foreign force for almost 2 decades. Your husband has recently died and had left half of his land to your daughters. And then the conquerors decided to invade your lands, even though under your husband you and your people had compromised with these invaders. And then you are publicly flogged and your daughters are violated. You and your daughters have been publicly insulted. What would you do in this scenario? I tell you what Boudicca did. She rallied the Celtic tribes and began a rebellion against the Romans. This actually came at a very opportune time. The governor at the time, Paulinus, was off in the far west invading the Isle of Morna, modern-day Anglesey, over in Wales. Boudicca's rebellion quickly built up steam. Her first target was the nearby Roman province of Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester. This settlement was very Roman. It had a law building, a Roman theater, and most importantly, a temple to the Emperor Claudius, because the Romans loved deifying their emperors after they died. And to top it all off, this place was originally a Celtic settlement, which got Romified. So, yeah. So this settlement was basically a large middle finger to the Celtic tribes, and Boudicca decided to show the Romans where they could shove that middle finger. Because despite its very Roman architecture, it was not very well defended at all. The closest legion, the 9th, was all the way in Lincoln. Well, technically speaking, it was more still invading Morna. But the closest regiment was in Lincoln. So I just corrected my own self. When they saw Boudicca's army approaching, the people of Camulodunum cried for help from other Roman settlements, such as Londinium, modern-day London, and the before-mentioned 9th Legion. Londinium did not take the threat seriously, and the 9th Legion were too slow to reach them. So let's see the beginning of the Boudicca line of destruction. Okay, so there's Norfolk, and I believe that Colchester's around here, so this is where she went. Terrifying, I know. Boudicca struck, and her attack was brutal. The Romans had given up on trying to build defenses, and they had retreated into the temple of Claudius. Boudicca burnt everything. The settlers were massacred. Apparently, even today, archaeologists, oh my god, I can't pronounce words. Apparently, even today, archaeologists, apparently, even today, archaeologists, I don't know why I say this. Apparently, even today, archaeologists can still find burnt soil. Talk about leaving a mark. Once this destruction was done, Boudicca took her forces to the next target, Londinium. On the way, they met with the 9th Legion, who had finally reached the location. You know, the part of the 9th Legion that was in Lincoln. The Legion was slaughtered. With this, the people of Londinium were most likely terrified. Here was this wild woman leading an army who had destroyed a Roman settlement and who had slaughtered an entire legion. Boudicca's army kept growing and became slower. By now, Paulinus had heard of what was going on, and he managed to reach Londinium. But he decided that his 1,000 men stood no chance against Boudicca. So they decided on a tactical retreat, leaving behind anyone who could not fight, such as women and children. They were left to the mercy of Boudicca, the non-existent mercy. Again, it was a massacre. No Romans or Roman-sympathetic Britons were spared. Now, another source that I looked at said that there is a layer of archaeological ash here. I don't know if that means there is just a burn layer in both Colchester and London, or if it's one or the other. Either way, some ground got burnt, and the source which claimed London was the location literally referred to it as the Boudiccan Destruction Horizon. Best place name ever. Okay, so let's just recap the Boudiccan line of destruction. So we got starting from Norfolk, roughly around here, somewhere. Then going down to Colchester, roughly around here. Then going down to London down here somewhere. So, yep. Boudiccan line of destruction. At this time, Paulinus retreated past St. Albans and had asked for reinforcements. But when he asked for support, many commanders were terrified. And to be honest, I wouldn't blame them. Paulinus apparently only managed to gather about 10,000 men, in comparison to the possibly 100,000 of Celts prepared to fight them. Boudicca went northward to meet the gathering Roman force. On the way, she decided to burn down another Roman settlement, modern-day St. Albans, as you do. London and St. Albans is up here. So yeah, it just turned into a bit of a going down past here to here to here. We don't know a final location. Judging by numbers alone, things did not look promising for the Romans. But while the Celts had the numbers, Paulinus and the Romans had admittedly superior tactics. One terrifying aspect of Celtic warfare were their war chariots, but Paulinus chose a location, Watling Street, where the Celts would be forced into a tighter position, making their chariots more of a hindrance. Another thing which tilted the odds in Rome's favor was that the Britons had become overconfident. They thought that their smaller Roman force stood no chance, so they decided to bring their wives and baggage trains to watch them. This would be one of the biggest mistakes they could make. There was a reason why Rome managed to take so much, whether it be in the days of the Republic or the imperial era. Rome had incredible tactical abilities. Paulinus took advantage of the terrain and of the Roman javelins. The javelins devastated the Celtic forces. And then, of course, there was the cavalry. Sorry, I'm not very good at describing warfare. The point is, Roman generals were experts at taking a situation where they were severely outnumbered and turning the situation around. The Celts were forced into a retreat, which was hindered by their baggage trains and their non-combatants. Apparently, the casualties on the Roman side numbered around 400, whereas the Celts numbered in the thousands. This was a devastating defeat for the Celts. After this, Rome took defending against the tribes more seriously. They slowly rebuilt their settlements. Boudicca herself, well, that is less clear. Tacitus reports she ended her life with poison. Cassius Dio claims she died of illness. Either way, she did not live long after the defeat of Watling Street. But the Boudicca story does not end there. Over the next 2,000 years, she fades into obscurity before making a comeback in the 16th century. See, Boudicca and her story has so often been used to promote certain political agendas, even as early as Tacitus and Cassius Dio. Tacitus used Boudicca as a way to criticize the Roman emperors. Cassius Dio uses Boudicca as a way to bash Nero. Seriously, he has Boudicca calling Nero a bad lyre player. I highly doubt she ever went to one of Nero's concerts, and Nero never really went on a world tour to Britannia. But after Rome, Boudicca just fades away. And then in the 15th century, the printing press is introduced to Europe, so more people are able to read old Roman texts like Tacitus and Cassius Dio. People in Elizabethan England would have probably looked at this woman being described and were like, wait, a queen who is British and red-haired and hates Rome? We have one too! Boudicca begins to rise in popularity over the next few centuries. By the Victorian era, she is a national hero. Just ignore that she probably wouldn't have liked the whole imperial colonizing mess. There is literally a statue of her in a chariot in London. And yes, I am definitely going to see it when I eventually go on my holiday in a few years. By the 20th century, she becomes a symbol for the suffragette movement. And admittedly, I can see why. A woman fighting against an oppressive patriarchal society, it makes sense how she could have become a feminist icon. Boudicca is an interesting figure. Her story is one which has been told and retold and used for political agendas for centuries. But what can we gather from this story? Well, that depends on you. I will give my take on it. Many may wonder why we would tell the story of someone who ultimately lost. Is this supposed to be a tragedy? A story of Roman superiority? Not in my mind. To me, the story of Boudicca is not supposed to be a story of victory, despite the fact her name literally means this very thing. To me, Boudicca is a symbol of resilience, of not backing down when someone tries to oppress you, to put you down. Boudicca fought for the right of her people, for the honor of her daughters. It is these sorts of stories of resistance which endure. We do not know much about Boudicca. The only ones who wrote about her were the Romans. These texts were written decades and over a century and a half after she lived. It is very likely that a lot of what we do know may not be accurate. Tacitus and Cassius Dio literally put words in Boudicca's mouth. The most concrete evidence we have are archaeological signs, such as the Boudiccan destruction horizon. But the accuracy of what exactly happened is not what draws people in. Boudicca is not just a historical figure. Hell, it is possible she did not even exist, but the legend does exist. Long after Rome left Britain, we are still telling her story. Boudicca is a symbol, a lesson, an example for all of us, because we all experience some situations where we must be more assertive. As a visually impaired, introverted woman who struggles with social interactions, I am constantly in situations where I need to be more assertive. We all go through it, whether we are experiencing discrimination or if some rude person cuts in front of you when you're trying to get a coffee. If your rights as a human being are being challenged, then maybe you should stop for a second and try to channel your inner Boudicca. Just please don't burn down any cities, okay?